Welcome, everybody. We're really excited today to have Sarah Trahern here. Sarah, of course, is an Owen alum, and we always have to lead with that because we're just so excited and proud.
I'm proud of it,
you
too.
might be the CEO of the CMA, but to us, you're still an Owen alum, and that's just the greatest.
And these guys, many of them will be Owen alums before too long themselves.
There you go. There you go. But, you know, I think when you look at Country Music Association, you know, you probably the word music is what jumps out to you, but when you look at Sarah's career, it's really television that jumps out to me. And she's going to tell you a little bit about her career trajectory here in a couple of minutes, but it's a, you know, a significant set of really interesting pivots through the television industry, starting with C-SPAN and then moving to TNN. And then eventually finding her way to CMA, and a lot of interesting stops and places along the way as that went. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. Of course, Sarah's won all kinds of awards, Power Woman here in Nashville, and been part of Leadership Music and all these kind of fantastic parts of our leadership community here in Nashville. But as I always said, we're just so delighted that she's here and one of us, and here to share a little bit of her story and her journey along the way. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the trajectory, the path, those twists and turns that I was talking about.
One of the things Dean Johnson was talking about, if you'd asked me when I got out of college if I was going to ever be the CEO of the CMA, I would say that living in Nashville, having gone to high school in Tennessee, I was never going to come back after I left to go to college. So, and in fact, I would come back here, I would work in the country music business, was not on my worldview at all. I went to Georgetown out of high school. I studied American political history and American studies. I knew pretty much throughout my 4 years of undergrad that I wanted to go into television. So while Georgetown didn't have any journalism classes, I spent all my internship time and any additional time I could get with hands-on experience in television over the summers and during the semesters. And so I graduated going into, I went to work for a political advertising firm for a little while, and then I went to work for C-SPAN, the Public Affairs Network in DC. As someone who studied politics, it was a great place to be. I covered the '88 and the '92 presidential elections. In '88, I spent about 35 weeks on the road on the campaign trail, which is a great way to see the country when you're in your 20s. I wouldn't want to do it now at age 51. It was a great gig. I became a manager very early on. We talked with some students earlier about that. When I was 25, I managed 3 people who were all much older than I was, which is always an interesting scenario to be in when you've never been a manager before. It was great. In DC, I got to do a lot of different things. We won some big awards for the shows we worked on. I worked with the CEO directly on a series called Book Notes, which is a 1-hour show with a nonfiction author that's still around today. Some of the shows I worked on still run on the networks on occasion. My name flies by in the credits. But I really had grown all that I could grow there. And I've been gone for 20 years, and 20 years later, the people that were my bosses and my boss's boss are still in the jobs they were in. So when I left because I needed to grow, not because I was unhappy, not because it was a bad place to work. I'm still really good friends with a lot of people there. In fact, 40% of their workforce today that's there were still people that I worked with 20 years ago. But for the path that I was on, I wanted to do some different stuff, and it was important to move. And frankly, I have young employees who work for me now that are going to need to leave. And as a manager, I'm going to go sideways for a second, but as a manager, that's my job, is to get the most of them, give them a great environment to grow, but at some point it's going to be to like your chicklings, kick them out the door, because they may not be in a position for them to grow within our organization, or some of them, frankly, may have to leave our organization to get other skill sets to come back in a higher level job. So I was in that position. So I looked around in 1995. I was up for a job as Ted Koppel's producer at Nightline, so it got down to 3 of us. And that was a job where you read all the newspapers in the morning, you had a 9 o'clock conference call about the shows that night. Show was on at 11:30 live, got off at midnight, go home, do it, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That's not much of a life. And I was about 30, and I'm like, okay, if I get that job, that's a pretty cool job. It's probably one of the top jobs in news. Great, and if I get it, and if I don't get it, I'll figure something else out. I didn't get it. I had a couple of other offers in DC to go produce for John McLaughlin and some other stuff. I'm like, I think I'm gonna move to Nashville. And I've got a lot of friends here who, a lot of them went to Vandy undergrad. I've had some crazy musician friends, and so I decided if it took me 3 months or 3 years, I was going to move to Nashville. through a bunch of circumstances, I ended up getting a job here at TNN, and I moved to Nashville in 1995. I had never worked for a for-profit network where you got ratings every day. So, you know,
not like C-SPAN.
Yeah, C-SPAN, you do a good show, you hope a certain number of people are watching, and you have a license to be boring. Like, you know, it's about the story. It's not about the sex appeal. You know, when I moved here, it was about ratings. And, you know, and until I took this job at the CMA for the last 20 years, and my whole life was defined by 15-minute increments. What happened at 2 o'clock in the morning? Why were the ratings down? I don't know. People were asleep. You know, you have to answer to why ratings are up or down. And so I came to TNN, learned a lot. Aside from not having dealt with ratings, I've never dealt with musicians union. I'd done some music shows on the side for fun when I was in DC, but not something day in and day out. So I really tossed myself into learning it. As I said to a group earlier, I really learned it from the budgets out, because it was in the middle of the budget process when I moved. So I took every budget that I was accountable for and just went through every line item. And why did they spend this much on hair and makeup? Why did they spend this much on IATSE stagehands? Why did the schedule go till 2 o'clock in the morning? And really looking at the previous year's budget, I reconstructed what my job was about and asked a bunch of questions. And I was passionate about it. And I'm a big believer when I hire people in finding people that are passionate about what you're going to do. It's the number one thing I say to any time I talk to groups of kids, whether it's little kids or business professionals like you guys. Find something you're passionate about, because you're successful follow. Because you're going to throw yourself into 12, 14, 20-hour days. It's not going to feel as much like work if you enjoy it versus, oh, I've got to slog my way through this again. I was at TNN through 3 different ownership groups. We were owned by Gaylord when I first moved here, which at the time had the Opry and the Ryman and the hotel and the amusement park and all those things. So big locally owned business. Then we were bought by CBS Cable, which I thought was great, because being a TV person, we're going to go work for a TV company versus an amusement park company. But we went to work for a TV company that was based in New York, and whose worldview was very focused on New York, not on networks outside of New York. And then about 2 years, so we downsized a little in that. We changed mission, went through a bunch of changes. And then our third ownership group was MTV Networks, Viacom, who bought the network, CMT and TNN, back in either end of '99, probably actually around 2000. 2000, early 2001. So we went through some more layoffs, and it got down to 12 of us here in Nashville for TNN. And I was offered a job to go when they rebranded the network from the Nashville network to the national network, and ultimately to Spike. So they offered me a job to go with them to New York. And I went up to New York and sat in some development meetings with the programming team, which I would have been a part of. And I was telling the dean earlier, one of the shows they were pitching was a Temptation Island show, where the production company was hiring hookers to break up couples. And I thought, man, I started my career at C-SPAN. I mean,
This is a long way from C-SPAN.
Yeah, my grandmother watches my shows and watches my name fly by on the credits. I don't know that I could have her watch this, hookers picking up guys on the beach was not really what I thought I joined TV for. Not that all my TNN shows were clean, by the way, just not that far out. And so I basically said to the folks, I really want to stay in Nashville, and when it's time, and I know it's going to be time at some point that you're going to close the doors in TNN, then you just need to lay me off, and I'm going to stay here and figure it out. That was in August of 2001. I expected we would all be in our jobs till maybe the beginning of 2002. And actually, I was out to dinner, or out to lunch with one of our lawyers, who ironically just 2 months ago I hired to work for me at the CMA. And the small world relationships come around. We were out to lunch, and our lunch conversation was speculating, when do you think the shoe's going to drop? No, I don't know. I think it'll be like right after Christmas or whatever. And we got back to our offices, and we had an email that said, today's a sad day in the history of MTV Networks. We've laid off 450 people, including closing the offices of TNN. And that's how we heard we were laid off. And you guys have all taken HR classes. You're like, that's not the way you do it. But we were such an oversight by then, and I was telling a group earlier that the memo about the layoffs had leaked. It was supposed to happen on Tuesday, the next day, had leaked to a website called fuckedcompany.com that used to be around. So their defensive move in New York, which was the right move, was to go ahead and do the layoffs the day before. But of the 450, the 12 of us in Nashville were such an afterthought that nobody thought to bother to tell us it was going to happen the day ahead. So, and my boss, who did know about this, was on an airplane coming back from Las Vegas. And so I got all the staff together, and I said, when Brian lands, he'll be here to talk to us. And HR was like, no, he'll come tomorrow, I know. I was like, no, I know Brian. He cares about us. He'll be here. And so suddenly I was out of a job. I knew eventually I was going to be out of a job, but I thought I had 6 months to start thinking about it. I was studying for the GMATs, thinking about coming here, thinking about going to other schools or going away. And it was CMA week, ironically. And my boss said, you really need to go to the show. And I said, look, I don't even want to think about any of this anymore right now. He goes, no, here are my tickets. You need to go to the show. And one of my best friends, Brian, is an architect, and he made me business cards. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I don't even know if I'm going to stay here. He goes, you need to have business cards because you're going to run into somebody that knows you and doesn't know how to reach you now that you're not at TNN anymore. So sure enough, that night, hey, sorry to hear about it. How do I reach you? So I passed my business cards out, went home, studied for the GMATs, went to Thanksgiving vacation, went into Christmas, and I got a call over the Christmas holiday from one of my leadership music classmates who offered me a job here in Nashville to produce a TV show and do publicity for him. Again, relationships matter time and time again. I can't tell you how many times I've had great opportunities in this pivot world, particularly because of just somebody I knew or somebody I worked with before. So always keep that in mind. So I went to work for him, but not on a staff basis. I hate doing publicity. You couldn't triple my salary for me to do publicity. And so I said to him, let's just date. I'll come work for you for 6 months. I'll do your TV show. I'll do your publicity. And at the end of 6 months, we'll either decide that this is working out and we'll get married and come work full time, or it's not and we'll break up and it's fine. And so during that time, I never set out to have my own company. I'm not wired to be an entrepreneur. I've got friends who are, and that's great. I'm wired to be a corporate structure person and manage people. When I get up in the morning, the thing I'm most excited about is when the folks who work for me get it done. I don't have to get it done, but if they've moved the ball forward, I'm so excited for them, and my job is to make sure they're doing that. So I did my own thing. Was doing my own thing, working for him. Other people started calling me that I worked with before. One guy at Scripps called me to start doing some more for DIY and HGTV. CMT, which had been affiliated with TNN, which was still based here, started calling me, and I did red carpet specials for them. Then I did a music special for them my first semester at Owen, and I had to take all my exams, particularly my accounting exam, 3 days early. So while my classmates are taking the exam on Friday, I'm in the middle of a big production that I'm overseeing, so I had to go in on Tuesday while they were still in study group. I don't think I did very well on that exam. So I was doing my own thing, did it for about 1.5 years, and again, Scripps came calling. They bought a TV shopping network down in Antioch, with the goal being that Scripps, which is Home and Garden, Food Network, now Travel Channel, DIY, at the time Fine Living. There's 4 networks when I went to work for them, and later it became 7. They bought a TV shopping network with the vision of taking things like they had on HGTV and selling it. So, this is a beautiful chair. Let me tell you the features of this chair. You can see this chair on the Property Brothers on Saturday, and now you can buy it for 5 easy payments of $9.95. So I went to work there. I was my division had 110 employees. I was thumbs up. I'm back in the management game. I made the big mistake of taking the job only knowing the person I was going to report to. Only walking through the facility once and seeing, isn't that cool? When they do a show, they have like an EKG monitor. And when the sales are good, the EKG monitor goes up. It's like ratings, but on acid. You get immediate feedback. Is it working? Is it not working? Right now. And so their goal was to take it and move it from a hard sell platform to a platform that was a corollary business to what the other Scripps networks were doing. It was not successful, and they ended up actually selling it about 6 months after I left. But it was not successful because we had trained the audience. The audience we had as a network was one audience. And where the company wanted it to go was so different. And one of the senior executives I worked with, who came in from another Scripps network, said, I think the only way we could have ever made it successful would have been to totally stop it, not just rebrand it, but stop it, send all those viewers away, and be willing to take the time to rebuild it from scratch. It was, as I said earlier to the dean, it was the most miserable year and a half of my life. And I'm finishing up Owen at the time, by the way. So my last semester of Owen, for all my years up until then, and I probably worked, I don't know, I was probably 38 at the time. I loved getting out of bed in the morning. I loved going to work in television. I loved what I've done everywhere along the way, and for that year and a half, I was miserable. The person I dated at the time, I feel for him because I would just come home at night and just bawl. You know, I don't think I ever cried more. And I went through so many clinics because of those 110 employees, there was not a day that went by without somebody in my office coming in to cry. And I understood why they were. It was a miserable environment for someone like me that came in with in a much more collaborative approach. But I learned a lot during that time. And then Scripps happened to buy a network out of Denver called Great American Country. And they looked at moving GAC to Knoxville, where the other facilities were, but really where it needed to be was Nashville. And they brought in a friend of the CEOs who had experience in country radio to run it, and they made the decision to move it to Nashville. Headlines, GAC to move to Nashville. I'm like, hello, I'm here, I'm in your office already, all you need to do is move me over. You know, I know how to do this. So about 2 or 3 months later, I got brought on to GAC as the SVP of programming, and then over my time there, I became the general manager. So my boss retired 2012, so I got to run a network before I was 50, which was one of the things kind of on my early bucket list, and then that long went away when I was in my 20s. I'm like, oh yeah, it'd be great to run a network by I'm 50. Yeah, I never really thought that would happen, but it did. And I spent 10 great years at GAC. Really got to go back to really my third chapter dream job. I guess C-SPAN was a good dream job, but then moving my way through things to TNN, pivoting back to GAC, now with my MBA. And you know, not a lot of people at Scripps knew I had my MBA, and somebody asked me, several times I always get asked, would you do it again? And when I was first out, I would say no. For me, I paid my own way. I went for my own edification and growth. It wasn't about getting the next job or my company send me for something. And the further I get away from it, the further I appreciate what Owen taught me. So I was at GAC, heading along, and my boss wasn't going to retire. And I was at the same kind of place where I was at C-SPAN, where loved what I did, had a great place, but I'd done it now for almost 10 years or 9 years at the time, and I need some growth. I need to try something different just to feed my soul in this mix. I had to lay off some friends. I've been involved in 2 restructurings, a lot of big corporate projects. That was great. They really wanted me to move to Knoxville and take on a bigger role at HGTV, which is great. As a programmer, a TV person, if that's where my passion was, great, one of the top networks in the country. Thumbs up, you can go, but I really love Nashville. And so I was meeting with one of my business coaches to talk about what that next step was. If I stay here in Nashville, what is the next step for me? And she was really pushing me, and we had kind of this theme. I want a position that does this, that has this meaningful piece. Here's the things I want, kind of my mission statement, and here are the things that I don't want it to be. She's like, what is that? I'm like, oh, come on, I'm paying you good money. You tell me. She's like, no, you know what it is. And I just blurred out, I want to run the CMA or the Hall of Fame. I'm like, oh, it's pretty damn cool. That would be really great. Okay, well, it's not going to happen. I'm doing my thing, and just there's people in those jobs. They're going to be in those jobs forever. I know both of them. Fine. So I'm going along my way, and the person in my job decides not to stay on. And word goes through the industry that this job is open. And that's my dream job. That's the job I should be in. But now I'm running the network. Now I've got these people, some of them who have followed me to 2 or 3 jobs who are working for me. I'm getting ready to ask some of them to move to Knoxville. am I in the position to jump ship? And my little brother said to me, I was talking to him, I'm like, but this job it's going to be highly competitive, but this is the job. Like, this has everything I need. It's got TV, 3 TV shows on ABC. It's got people management. It's got reorganization stuff, dealing with the board, people I know well. This is my thing. It's totally different, left to center of anything I've ever done, but I can't leave these people who work for me. I can't leave this company. I need like 3 more years. 3 years from now, I can leave, no problem. And my little brother said to me, he said, Sarah, it's like meeting your spouse. You can't control when it's going to happen. It's not like you have a magic wand that says, okay, I want this job, and in 5 years I want this one. So go for it. What do you lose, to go for this job? And if you get it, great. Then you have to make a decision. But if you don't get it, no harm, no foul. So it was the end of October, because I got the job offer on Halloween. End of October, 2 years ago now, and there are 7 finalists for the job, and my interview for this job was with 10 people simultaneously. I happened to know 8 of the 10. One of the 10 I didn't know had an Owen connection, so when he saw that on my resume, we had a Vanderbilt discussion. And the other person I didn't know, but to this day is now one of my better friends. And it was so secretive, they had us, it was like, what's the show with the roses? Yes. So they had...
That's bad that you guys know that.
Yeah. No, it's actually probably good that they know it. It's bad that me, the TV person, doesn't. It was all coordinated. So we had cars pick us up at our house and took us to the interview, which was done out at Arrington Vineyards, which is owned by Kix, who was one of the people in the room doing the interviews. And it was also coordinated. So they said, well, there's an interview like at this time, and there's this time. So I realized that they were leaving like an hour and a half windows for the interviews. And the person before me, they said, but a couple of them have got done really early, so you need to be ready as of, I think mine was supposed to be, I was supposed to be out there at 4 o'clock, but you need to be ready as of, 3:15 in case the one before you goes early. So sure enough, I got the call, the one before me went early, so we're gonna come pick you up. And, okay, well, is that a good thing that they went early? Like they were so bad, they just wrapped it up and kicked him out? Start thinking about those things. And so I got to the interview, and I prepared for it pretty well. Again, I'm going to know the people, but by the end of the interview, I wanted that job so badly. And I remember calling my husband on the way home and going, man, if I don't get this job, I don't know what I'm going to do now, because I know I can't stay at Scripps. I don't want to go to Knoxville, but this is the job for me. And the job ran the full time. The interview ran the full time. So when we ran over, I was like, thumbs up. I must have done okay. But it was one of those things I never would have envisioned it, other than I did envision it 2 years previous. But I think one of the things that one of the things I'm proud of, kind of in that realm of finding things I'm always passionate about, and just it's not going to always be a shot straight to the top. And that's okay. Like sometimes that linear path is, you miss a lot of lessons along the way. And one of the things I think is being able to kind of make these pivot turns, like, okay, what's the next chapter? What am I going to learn? And there is a place, I'm all for staying places a long time. I've stayed most places 10 years. My personal kind of retirement plan is 10 or 12 years at CMA, and then I hope to go on to that next chapter. That's 3 contract renewals, by the way, so hopefully that happens. But you learn and you pick up other things along the way. So I think, particularly for your generation, you're going to have faster pivots than I did, because things are just changing faster. And it's not going to be necessarily our parents' generations, where they may have stayed 25 years and had the gold watch. Some people get to do that still, but I don't want to hire people that are come in and leave me in 6 months or a year. I'm hoping they're going to gather things along the way. But as a senior leader, I get there's those changes, and sometimes I have to coach my mid-level managers that it's okay. We just lost a great person on our sales team. We haven't told the staff till we get past CMAs. And she's going to her dream job. And she came to tell me before she told her managers, because she said, you asked me when I first met you what my dream job was. And this is what it is. It's to be in sales and work with artists directly. And she's going to go do that for William Morris. If I offer her 30 grand more, 40 grand more, whatever, that's not going to keep her here. She needs to go. it's the right thing for her, and we're going to continue to get to work with her. And I think that's being open to change. And I also tell my team, let me know early when you're starting to look. Like, don't come in and just let me on the way out, let me know as you're kicking out the door or when you've gotten so bitter. Let me help you in those ways. So I think that's an important piece too.
So I've heard you say you love managing people.
Yeah.
That's a thread throughout your career. What are some pivotal times for you and experiences in leadership? Not so much, those transitions between different jobs. When you think about your leadership journey, what were a couple pivotal times, things or experiences that really kind of changed the way you manage and lead?
I think about, I usually tend to be the positive person, think about those, and of course now I go to the negative moments. But I think about one time at Shop at Home, and I've actually had to use this sentence one other time in my career, when some folks on my group were really letting me down on being buttoned up on some things. And I give people a lot of rope. I'm not a big title person. I'm not a very democratic kind of not just the typical everybody's got an open door, but I was fortunate early in my career to have some good ideas as a young producer that the CEO listened to, and I think that's important, that it's not just the food chain. Food chain has value in other pieces, so I don't go around it when I'm managing people, but when it comes to ideas, I'm very democratic. And I remember speaking to our team at Shop at Home, and I had this discussion once at GAC, is my shoulders are incredibly broad, and I'm going to defend you guys when you're on your team, or when you're doing your work to the best, but you need to have my back too. We need to have the best plan, we need to execute it. This is a two-way street. I'm not going to just defend you guys for doing stupid stuff. And I had a situation the other day, which I was so proud. We have a young employee, and his boss is out on unexpected maternity leave. So she went into labor 2.5 months early and delivered a 2.4 pound baby last Saturday, and who's doing pretty well. But that changes the whole dynamic. I mean, she and I had a preliminary plan for her maternity, but we hadn't gone into super depth. And suddenly she's out, and we're in the middle of the award show in 7 days. And she's in charge of membership and balloting. So her team manages all the 80 board members and all their schmooze needs, and whether they know where they can park or not. They also manage the balloting process with Deloitte & Touche, which is a big integrity piece of our business. There are a lot of things in that mix. And so suddenly she's out, and her kind of number two has her grandfather die, who she's very close with. So now it's the two really junior people in her department who think they're ready to be department heads. And actually they're pretty good. And one of them was in charge of something with all the radio winners, and the artist was supposed to call them and do all these things. I knew what the plan was. He was putting it into effect, and then he had to go out of town for something. So we started to get word back Friday afternoon that the artist didn't really tell everybody, the winners, the right information. He's gone, he calls me, we talk about some solutions, and he's taking it so seriously. He is just, it's not that big a deal. Or I said, it'll all work out, unless, perspective. When you get to be older, you get perspective. But he didn't have the perspective because it was his baby, and he owned it, and he was gone, but he cared to find a solution and jumped in. And as much as I wanted to say, there's so many other things going on, and brush him off and da-da-da-da, I went back to when I was 22 years old. And I remember when I owned a project and really was upset because it didn't go the way I wanted to, and I just wanted to go home and like, oh my gosh, what do they not know? So I took a breath, and I gave him the 45 minutes it needed to talk through the thing. And I hung up the phone, and I was so proud of him. And I'm like, he will be me in 15 years or 20 years because he's got that passion, he thinks through it. He needed someone to soften the edges. And that's, when you get to be my job, it's not, can I still produce the TV show? Sure. Can I, manage the spreadsheet? Sure. Hopefully I have good people in all those jobs between now and then. Did I just pull my mic out? Okay, great. I got enough people and just trust the people in the jobs between here and there that I don't have to get my hands dirty day to day. I mean, I've done a lot of TV, I can do that. But to have to be able to take a moment and let him grow was really pretty cool.
That's neat. So let's talk about that 80-member board. You're now in a non-for-profit. 80-member board, that sounds daunting even to me.
Twice as many board members as staff members, so yeah.
But it is a very different environment, a lot
Yeah.
more leadership around building consensus and kind of herding all those board members. What does that look like for you, and how is that different, and what have you learned in that process?
I get asked a lot about my stress level. People are like, oh my gosh, you know, particularly those who know some of my board members who know that some of them can be, they're very loud. They're leaders of their own businesses. I mean, they're the heads of all the record labels. We've got 6 artists. We've got the heads of the publishing companies. It's like Noah's Ark. So to get to the 80, we have at least 2 from every category. We have 13 membership categories. So there's minimum of 2 artists, 2 record labels, 2 publishers, 2 radio people, and realize that, by the way, that they all have competing business interests. So the CMA was founded in 1958 in a hotel room in Miami by a bunch of executives who decided to put their personal business interests to the side because Elvis Presley was so popular. And Elvis was taking over the airwaves, and stations were converting to rock and roll from country because they wanted to follow the Elvis trend. So the people in country got together and said, hey, we need to, for our own strength of our business, work together and put our business interests aside. So that's the premise that those 80 people come into the room. So a lot of people say, gosh, that's got to be so stressful for you. But coming from an environment where for the last 20 years I've gotten ratings on every 15-minute increments. So the big thing for me has been transparency and over-communication. And it may be is how much can I send there's so much stuff going on this week with our folks. So we have events every night and 4 big things with our foundation this week in terms of us giving money out for charity and different places to be. And I just have to overly communicate to all of them. So when I see them, when I send a lot of, here's everything going on so they don't get caught by surprise. I don't want a board member to read something in the newspaper and not know about it. And this stuff is happening in our world so fast. Sometimes the hardest part is I have the best part is I have 3 officers that I report directly to. And my predecessor reported to the board as a whole, but it was restructured. So we have the board and we have an executive committee of about 15, and then we have my 3 officers. So chairman, president, and president-elect. So I know for the next 3 years who my boss is going to be. Changes every year. Everyone can come in with their own agenda, and everyone does come a little bit with I want my legacy to be this. I previously was the chairman of the Academy of Country Music, which is kind of a competitive organization on the West Coast. So I know what it's like to be in that chair and work with someone in my chair. You know, every year your boss is going to change, but it's really 3 people you have to keep informed with stuff all the time. I'm a big phone person. Our chairman right now is an early morning guy. He runs a business management company. So I know at 6 o'clock in the morning he's at his desk, or 6:30. So I can call him in the morning, and I had a long list of stuff to go over with him today. But I really have to go over it with all 3. And if I have to do a 4-page email just to make sure they know everything, it's just a pain. So to me, I'd much rather pick up the phone and call and make a quicker conversation. But it's the CMA board runs the organization. It's not a board that's a secondary position. And when I took this job, I'd previously worked with the CMA enough that I knew that they had a very, very strong board. And when we got the rights for the shows, CMA shows from them, the committee would call me and say, you know, we made this decision, not the staff.
So the higher you've gone up in these organizations, more pressure, more ambiguity, how do you manage that, and particularly the risks around that? They're not always black and white decisions. One of the things I've had a challenge with one of our senior employees is teaching her to manage in the grays. Sometimes there are decisions that are black and white. But sometimes it really is taking all of the facts into the funnel and making the best decision you can at the time and coming out the other side. I had a great boss at the end of my time at Scripps who, if I brought him a business problem, he'd say, were any small children injured? That was his question. And I think, you know, we're 2 blocks from the Children's Hospital. It's a great filter. In most cases, no, it's just, of course not. There's no small children are injured. He goes, then just solve it. Like, it's a business problem. You can solve it. What's the right thing to do? And as soon as he asked me that, I always knew instinctively what the right thing to do was. And then his 3rd question would be, why aren't you doing that?
usually about a political thing. Well, I already said I was going to close that division of the company, and now I'd have to go back on that. And he goes, but you said it was the right thing to do, so why is it the right thing to do? And I said, well, it's the right thing to do because of this. You know, usually, and you know, we all make mistakes. I think that's the other piece, is knowing it's okay to make mistakes. But, you know, no small children will die at the end of the day by most of the decisions we're making. And I think that's good perspective.
That's great. Well, questions from you guys? You've heard a lot now. What questions do you have for Sarah?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned that different personal and professional relationships were very helpful in your career. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you're able to network and kind of how that happened? Was it something by chance or somebody switching jobs? Or?
Yeah. When I moved to Nashville, I had I had a great DC Rolodex. You know, and as one person who used to book, I think, Face the Nation said, you know, she could do her job from anywhere because she has the Rolodex that has the person who's the Secretary of State's next door neighbor at his beach house. So if something goes on and she needs someone to get to the Secretary of State at his beach house, she knows how to do that. I had that Rolodex in DC. And so in making the decision to leave, I was giving up kind of that network of people and started over. And one of the things about Nashville is to remember it's a really, really small town. And every relationship matters. You know, I had a guy call me once who was trying to get something from us at TNN, and my assistant had talked to him a couple times. And I got on the phone with him, and he's like, well, you know, when Tracy finds out that you're saying that we're not going to do the show. And I went through, he goes, well, I said, well, why do you should do it, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, Tracy's going to be really mad. And I said, well, so who do you think I am? And he's like, well, you're Tracy's assistant, and Tracy's the boss. I'm like, no, Tracy's my assistant. And you've just degraded me and talked down to me in a way that I don't want anybody ever talking to one of my staff, so I'm not going to do business with you. And, you know, and he was someone from out of town that we never had to do business with again. But I was working at GAC on a deal with a big artist and their manager, and CMT was in the running. CMT is, we used to work for them. I got a lot of friends there, so this is not an anti-CMT story. But we were in a counter negotiation. And we were able to give up some things as the smaller network to get the project. It was more important for us to get it. But also in the negotiation, I knew that we were going to want to go back to this artist the next year and do something else again. So I'm looking at this negotiation as a multiple year negotiation. I think my counterpart at CMT was looking at it as, I want this show now, but I can't give up these things. And so we got the deal, and the next year came up, they didn't even bid it out to the other people because we had been good partners with this artist and this manager, and the artist himself knew that we were good partners. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's the artists and the agents. But when I took this job, the artist called me and said, the only thing that I'm disappointed in is that we can't find a mutual win. And I think, and it never really struck me that he knew that all those things mattered, but I do think that your personal brand grows from every environment you're in. Whether it's stuff I've done with Leadership Music, or I just finished Leadership Nashville, or other things in the community. The thing that's the most frustrating to me is I don't have time to give to as many people that I genuinely do care about as I used to. You know, I probably get 5 emails a week, maybe even 10. Or can you meet with my friend's son who's doing this or that? And I try to do as much of those as I can, but I just, you know, my time is not my own anymore. And so things that I really want to do that I think are important for relationships, I can't do. But I will say, any industry is a small town. And when I joined Scripps in the senior management level, I'm at a senior management meeting in Cincinnati, and the guy who's sitting in front of me who ran one of their TV stations was the general manager of the station in Knoxville I interned with when I was a freshman in college. And here we are as peers in television, but I interned for him 30 years before, and he remembered me, so that's a great thing, but you just never know how small your industries are, and just try not to burn bridges if you can.
We're gonna have to wrap up, but I have 5 one-word questions for you. So you can only do one word, okay. So this is 30 seconds. Who has the greatest impact on you as a leader? Who's had the greatest impact?
Brian Lamott. 2 words.
What one word best epitomizes a good leader to you?
Open or engaged.
What 3 words describe your legacy as a leadership? Your legacy of leadership.
Democratic, passionate, and fun.
What one experience do you believe all early leaders would benefit from?
Layoff.
I love it. That kind of loops us back to the beginning of your story. We thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much, and good luck.